Hi there, welcome along to a Back Pages Tonight Deadline Day special. We're here for an hour to bring you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. After what a day. Joining me are, in this order, the chief football writer for The Independent, Miguel Delaney, the sports writer for The Guardian, Jonathan Lee, and the Mirror's chief football writer as well, John Cross. Welcome along to all of you. Let's quickly run through the back pages then, because lots of them to go through. News desks everywhere still putting their back pages together, but this is what the Guardian's digital platforms report on. The fast-moving deadline day action, Alexander Isak's deal, and of course the failed Mark Guehi move to Liverpool as two of their main attractions. The Sun is also tracking all those moving deals. A huge amount still unconfirmed this evening, but we are hearing significant news on Harvey Elliott is imminent, that's what I meant to say. More on that in just a moment. And here at SkySports.com, we're also keeping across the things that continue to unfold, including Gianluigi Donnarumma's move to Manchester City. All of those deals and more are about to go under the spotlight. But we're under the spotlight. I'm going to get to these guys in just a minute. Let's get to Newcastle now, because they're looking like they're losing Alexander Isak, but they have signed two strikers in this window. One today. Let's join Keith Downey for the very latest. So, Keith, what can you tell us right now?
Yeah, Vicky, two sagas, transfer summer sagas over now. Alexander Isak, as you rightly say, completed, finalised move from Newcastle to Liverpool for a British transfer record. And just in the last minute, Newcastle United themselves have confirmed the signing of Yoane Wissa from Brentford. Another protracted chase for Newcastle this summer. They put three offers to Brentford. The first of those, 25 million. The last of those, 50 million pounds plus 5 million pounds in add-ons. Of course, that was accepted by Brentford this morning. Wissa was already up here in the northeast to formalise that transfer, to have a medical, and just as well as he travelled through the night, he drove up himself, and just as well he did do that, because I'm told the deal was rubber stamped, pushed through with just 30 seconds left to spare, and that was Newcastle using the deal sheet system, so they had an extra 2 hours to work within. So Yoane Wissa, now a Newcastle United player, he's signed a 4-year contract and he has been given the number 9 shirt. So good news for Newcastle, a striker in the door that I think will please the fans after what has been a really bruising summer, losing their once hero Alexander Isak to Liverpool.
Yes, they will be a little bit bruised, won't they? Thank you very much, Keith. Well, it was a quiet window for Aston Villa until deadline day, but they have added to their squad to date. Rob Jones has been across it all. And what can you tell us right now? You've got a story for us, haven't you, Rob?
Yeah, evening, Vicky. Signing number 3 of deadline day has just been confirmed by Aston Villa. It is Harvey Elliott from Liverpool, on loan with an obligation to buy next summer for £35 million, conditional on appearances. Liverpool have inserted both a buyback and a sell-on clause as part of that agreement for Harvey Elliott, which I think just tells you how much they think of the player, someone that they would have liked to keep, but such is the competition for places in attack now at Liverpool, with Alexander Isak joining today, Ugo Ekitike and Florian Wirtz arriving earlier this summer as well. So Elliott arrives here. There was interest from RB Leipzig. Elliott himself has turned down interest from both West Ham and Fulham, his former club, earlier on this summer. I know from speaking to Arne Slot last season, he would have liked to have given him more game time. He only started 2 Premier League matches. Both of those came after Liverpool had won the title, and he wanted to build on what was an excellent summer for him personally, the player of the tournament as England won the under-21 Euros. So he arrives in attack for Aston Villa. So too does Jadon Sancho, also on loan from Manchester United. Aston Villa will pay a loan fee and also cover initially 80% of Jadon Sancho's wages. I'm sure you and the guys will talk in the studio a little bit later on that Jadon Sancho will feel he has a lot to prove in the Premier League. It has been underwhelming, to say the least, his time at Manchester United. He went on loan to Chelsea last season, 31 Premier League appearances, 3 goals, 4 assists, but Chelsea chose to pay £5 million to send him back to Manchester United rather than keep him on a permanent deal. So 2 attackers through the door, 1 defender as well, also with links to Manchester United. Victor Lindelof has arrived as a free agent, almost 200 Premier League appearances in his career, so plenty of experience. He will provide competition for places for the likes of Tyrone Mings, Ezri Konsa and Pau Torres. And 3 arrivals in the nick of time, you would say, for Unai Emery, who has grown increasingly frustrated, I think, in the last week or so, that Villa haven't been able to add to their squad, albeit hamstrung by both PSR rules and UEFA rules. They've been fined earlier this summer for failing to comply with UEFA's rules. Part of the conditions for not having to pay a subsequent fine later on is that they make a profit on player sales this summer. So they couldn't even reinvest all of the nearly £40 million they received for Jacob Ramsey. But they have got 3 players in on deadline day, and Unai Emery will hope those 3 players can help them build on and improve on a poor start to this season. 3 games, 1 point and no goals so far for Aston Villa.
Yes, indeed. It's been a torrid state of affairs for this season so far. Thank you very much indeed, Rob, for hanging on in there in the dark. Look, let's just get reaction immediately to those 2 stories we got there. Let's start with the Wissa. I mean, it was gonna happen, I guess. It's a domino effect. A good bit of business, would you say, there for Newcastle?
Probably as good as I can do in the circumstances. I think the price has surprised a lot of people. And, I mean, it's quite rare, I think, for a deal to go from what the initial offer was to what they've ended up paying, 25 to 55 million?
Yes, it seems quite a hike, didn't it?
Yeah, and like Brentford, obviously, to be fair to them, as they do, I mean, like, this is a club that's built itself up on clever recruitments. They're not exactly going to buckle. But Newcastle, I suppose, had to make the best of what was an unfavourable or an undesirable situation, given the Isak saga. And it's remarkable, I mean, what Keith was saying there about that deal being completed 30 seconds before the deadline.
Given how... drove himself. I mean, that's more...
Well, exactly, yeah. Talk about desire.
I know, absolutely. I mean, he agitated for that move and certainly got it, didn't he, Visser?
Yeah, and I mean, there's an interesting symmetry there with obviously how Isak has agitated for his move. I think you'll find a lot of Newcastle fans who won't ever countenance, Isak being, at Newcastle again, who are quite happy to wade through Wissa's behaviour in trying to get a move. This is essentially the way the industry works. And anyone with even a passing familiarity knows that for players who have a very short window of opportunity, that sometimes when you want to get the move you want, you have to use that leverage that you basically only really get during the transfer window. Yeah,
I mean, let's talk about them. We'll come back to Villa a little bit later on in the programme, but let's talk about the story that's dominated this window and the move of Alexander Isak. I know your paper has gone with it rather large on the back of their back page this evening. Is there a worrying blueprint, what we witnessed this window? Let's first get over that hurdle, because, it was a player then that just said, basically, I'm not going to play for you anymore. I want the move. I'm getting the move. And it seems that that's exactly what he's gone and done.
Yeah, I love the makeup of that back page. I know I'm biased, but I think that's I think it sums it up brilliantly, right. Because, you are then talking about the record. It's a £125 million deal, smashes the previous best, which was Caicedo. But then, there's that element of disappointment down the bottom with Mark Guehi, because, Crystal Palace wouldn't allow him to go just because they couldn't get that one in. But going back to the original point, I do feel that it really plays into the whole element of player power. And I think that this sets a worrying trend for me, in that basically Isak has really gone out on a limb. He's forced the deal. I don't quite understand why he left it until July, because I do think his intentions and motives, even he has admitted it, were very clear from May. And basically, why not go public a bit sooner? I get, and maybe create a market. It's not been, particularly edifying. It's been unsavoury, and I do think it sets a trend. And basically, I was beginning to wonder in the middle of last week whether it would actually get done. But I think as the week gathered pace, I think it felt more and more likely. And I just think, Wissa looked at that probably over the weekend and thought, basically, how am I going to get this through? And that, I think, has probably played into his thoughts. I'm going to do it on social media, go nuclear, which he duly did. And it plays into it. And it plays into this whole element of player power. And I think that has been lost slightly. I think the clubs have sort of had the balance of power. But I think this summer has been really instructive over player power, led by Isak, quickly followed by Wissa. Next window, I guarantee a lot more players will be saying to their agents, shouldn't we do something like that? And I think that will, continue to be a bit of a trend.
It's interesting that Mark Guehi played for his club, captained his club, scored for his club, you know, as the consummate professional, doesn't get his move. Potentially, we don't know the ins and outs of this, but you're guessing that the player wanted to go there, but obviously Crystal Palace wanted to keep it. But actually then that put the power a little bit back more for Oliver Glasner, because yesterday he was saying, look, you know, we can't sell Mark Guehi. This is ridiculous almost, you know. So does it show that actually if you don't agitate for a move, you might not get it, and actually he's not got what he wanted?
Well, that's probably it, because I think the player power thing is really a bit double-sided here. I mean, there's actually an argument, I suppose, that the reason players have to agitate is because their power is actually quite limited, and their window of opportunity is very limited. And like all of this is in the context of, say, there's a short career, they want to maximise it. I suppose they have to do what they feel they need to do to try and maximise it. I think John is right. It does leave kind of it can be unedifying. You can feel unsavoury, but. And like, there's the obvious question: why sign such lengthy contracts if these are eventually your plans? But equally, their windows to actually do this are extremely small. And as soon as that window closes, suddenly all that leverage is gone, all the leverage goes back to the clubs. So they have the very short time to try and execute it. Look, and there are other examples this window actually where it hasn't worked. I mean, Lookman's one. He has one to play for Atlanta. It doesn't look like he's got his move as of right now. Eze, of course, actually was again a model pro. He did get his move. I think Palace, to be fair, would probably say that Liverpool came in too late and it left them with too little time to do anything.
Yeah, I mean,
I also think that this whole narrative it's very simplistic. I mean, Wayne Rooney agitated for his move at United, didn't get it. Cristiano Ronaldo, he was like kept his head down and got his move. I think that there is something a little bit off, I think, when it comes to the way we judge player behaviour. I think we hold players to it, and I'd have loved to have seen Isak stay at Newcastle. Like they love him there; he's got a team built around him. But I think we hold players to a higher standard than we do the sporting directors or coaches or agents or the owners or clubs themselves are very happy to buy and sell players and move them around and trade them around as if they're pawns on a chess game.
Nicolas Jackson might be a good example of that.
Well, there we go. I mean, the clubs are very happy to play this game, but for some reason, when a player tries to use their leverage, it's seen as some great moral outrage.
Well, that's it. I mean, a massive theme of this window has actually not been players agitating to leave, but unwanted players that clubs want to sell but can't. And if you're going to have a bomb squad, then the other side of that is you're going to have players agitating. This is the power balance, and it's delicate, but these are the two extremes.
Let's just have a listen, actually, to what Oliver Glasner actually said about not losing Guehi yesterday ahead of their match.
We have an agreement that we just selling Mark if we have the right replacement in. Yeah. And we wanted to have this replacement at the beginning of the season, of the pre-season, to be independent from this situation. This was the 9th of July. Today was 31st of August. There's no replacement in the building. So that it's clear one part of the agreement is not fulfilled. That means we can't sell Mark.
John, is that Oliver Glasner putting his stamp and his authority on Palace?
I love what he's done there. I think that's brilliant management, to be honest. And he has made absolutely clear that he wants not just one but two defenders in. That was what he wanted. And I also think he's been so successful and so good for Crystal Palace. I mean, this is the guy that was one of the first major trophy, fabulous FA Cup, onto the Community Shield, into Europe, absolutely brilliant manager. And I love the way that he plays football and has produced, taken Palace to a whole new vision and an ambition, really. And this is the guy that basically has been able to say to or convince Steve Parish to, before that Steve Parish would sanction a sale, that he has to make sure that he has got enough defensive cover in the building before he sacrifices Mark Guehi. And I think the other point really to make about Mark Guehi is that it hasn't worked out for him, but what a model pro he has been. He cuts such a graceful figure, doesn't he? Such a strong leader. Imagine being that brilliant influence in the dressing room. What character. I love the way that, having talked to him on England duty, that he speaks and expresses himself. He's really someone to be admired. The way that I'm not sure that many other players in the similar situation could have played so well as he did yesterday. And that speaks to him being a model pro and an absolute consummate professional and really a leader and example for what, a lot of players want to be. And I just think there would be a concern for a lot of clubs for a player who's travelled north, gone to a medical, completed the medical, waiting for the, it all to be signed off, whether he could be reintegrated, but not with Mark Guehi. I just feel that this is a player who's going to go back. He will give his heart and soul for Crystal Palace. Let's be clear here. I think what will happen is, and I think it's been very, very obvious throughout the whole window, that it was Liverpool or a free transfer next summer. And he will go as a free agent next summer. I think there'll be more than just Liverpool in for him. He will arguably get a much bigger deal, a better deal next summer. So this isn't him kind of absolutely, and absolutely that's a big point. But I think he, was willing to kind of put that on the back burner because the opportunity was now, and now he will actually get a more lucrative deal personally next summer without a shadow of a doubt.
And in terms, this is a difficult one for Liverpool because actually, if you weighed it up, did they need Mark Guehi more than they needed Alexander Isak?
You could certainly make that argument. If you look at their first 3 or 4 games this season, obviously they've recruited really heavily in the attacking positions, but Kerkez, I think he's a great player when the game's much more dynamic and fluid. I have certain doubts about him when it's more static. Jobberslai has done a great job at right back. He's not a long-term option there.
What a great goal the other day.
So you could argue that Guehi was the player, or certainly some kind of centre-back reinforcement is the player they needed most urgently of all. So I think you are now slightly vulnerable if you're Liverpool to a big injury to Van Dijk or Konate. Then potentially you're relying on Joe Gomez, who's not been injury-free himself in the past. So I think if you look at how Liverpool have started the season and now the balance of that squad, where they built last season's title win on that strong defence and being able to keep teams out for long periods. That would be the slight worry for me. For as spectacular a window as they've had, that maybe they're slightly unbalanced now. Yeah,
they certainly conceded a fair few goals, probably more than they would have wanted to so far this season. In terms of Isak, is there any way that bringing him in could unbalance the attacking?
Well, it is strange because the one thing you would say about this Liverpool squad right now is they're not short of goals. Like of everything you can say about them, like their games so far have been so open, so free-flowing. They've scored 8 goals in 3. And yesterday's game was a bit more suppressed for obvious reasons, but you can see what they've been doing. And we're actually in a weird one now where there is an argument that, given the way the games have gone, given, say, what Slot has spoken to Jamie Carragher about, that Liverpool could actually have done with Martin Zubimendi more than Arsenal could have, and Arsenal could have done with Isak more than Liverpool could have. And there's obviously a bigger play here because I think, we can see the way direction of travel. It seems obvious that Isak is actually going to be the long-term successor to Salah as much as anything, and opportunity presented itself this year, so they kind of pretty much had to go and do it. But yeah, for all the kind of the statement of the summer, the amount of money they've spent, the fact they've broken the record twice, and how intimidating that attack looks for everyone else in the Premier League, it doesn't feel like as maybe an impermeable Liverpool as it could have been. They're not quite as intimidating as it could have been because there is still that openness. And it could be like they come down to so many games where they actually have to outscore the opposition because there is that... there are those potential gaps there.
Yeah, absolutely. OK. Stay with us because we've got a deal sheet that's snuck in late. Arsenal have confirmed that Alexander Zinchenko has joined Nottingham Forest on a season-long loan. And I know, obviously, John, you cover Arsenal. What's your thoughts on this?
I think it's a strange one, isn't it? Because I think I'm right in thinking that he's got a year left. So a loan is... is to the end, basically, for Zinchenko. A couple of weeks ago, Nuno, in amidst his sort of kind of angst with the owner, Marinakis, that basically said, look, I need 2 new fullbacks and a backup goalkeeper. And frankly, he's got all 3 now with Zinchenko. I think Zinchenko's just lost his way and lost his drive a little bit and motivation maybe at Arsenal, just because he went from being such a key player when he first signed in that season to being almost a kind of, at times, third choice left back. Right. And basically it's just difficult to... I think it's a shrewd signing from Forest because if he can kind of get his, almost his mojo and sort of focus and belief back, he's a really, really good technical player and he can do a decent job in midfield too. So I do actually think it's half decent bit of business. Arsenal have done some, they've obviously done some spectacular incomings But on the final day, they've really been very efficient and quite clever at moving players on, and Zinchenko being the last of those, really. So it's been quite shrewd.
It's interesting. It's also possibly potentially keeping a manager happy as well, as we know that Marinakis and Nuno are not potentially getting on at the moment.
No, I do think that's a key part of it. I mean, you know, seeing Nuno being interviewed even after that West Ham defeat yesterday, it didn't leave you with a sense of absolute certainty that Nuno will be the Nottingham Forest manager come the other side of the international break, did he? And I think they've given him the best opportunity, because this is the guy that's had such a brilliant time at Forest, led them back into Europe, and I do think he deserves so much respect. But it's clear, you know, from everything that I read and sort of kind of almost you see and, you know, and then sort of kind of put to it, that there has been clearly a bit of an issue between his relationship, and obviously that follows the appointment of Edu. And, you know, whether that is absolutely, you know, the sort of kind of the two things put together, let's see. But I do think Zinchenko's a smart bit of business, and I think overall Forest have actually been really busy again. And it'll be interesting because it's a new challenge for them. They've brought some exciting new players in, but it feels almost a little bit of a new, fresh team. Yeah. And I think Forest had such an amazing season last year. If they can get anywhere close to that, they'll have done well.
They certainly will. OK, look, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to look at the back pages on this transfer deadline day for you. Papers reaching us all the time, alongside Alexander Isak in a Liverpool shirt. We're going to also hear about the huge spend that's made this the biggest window ever we've seen. More on that to come. You are watching a special Back Pages tonight. It is, of course, transfer deadline day. Miguel, Jonathan and John still with me to talk all things keepers now, because that was a big subject, wasn't it, this window? Gianluigi Donnarumma from PSG looking to go to Manchester City for £26 million. And they've also finished this deal to sell Ederson to Fenerbahce as well. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, what does this do for Trafford? It was a bit of a pickle of a situation in terms of the goalkeepers with Manchester City, wasn't it? Yeah, and now, you know, so Trafford obviously was recalled in the summer. Struggled a little bit, I think, fair to say, or has looked a little bit uncomfortable. And obviously now probably wasn't anticipating Donnarumma coming in at the end of the window. And I think they also have Ortega and Bettinelli, so even if Ederson goes, that's a lot of keepers. I think the Donnarumma signing has to be looked at in context of where Guardiola is at his point in his City. I think, you know, a lot of people are expecting it to be his last summer, and if you look at the business they've done this summer, Cherki, Reinders, Aitner, these are not build for the future players. These are win me a trophy now players. And there's an interesting thing, and Donnarumma he might not be able to ping a 70-yard, you know, through ball, but Pep Guardiola player, isn't he? But he wins you finals, right? And if your defining goal is to win a trophy and go out in a blaze of glory, Donnarumma is a guy who wins you shootouts. I think Ederson's shootout record's actually very poor. I think he's saved 2 out of 25 shootout penalties in the last few years. He's won 88% of his shootouts. And I wouldn't be surprised if Guardiola, a details guy, had looked at the fine margin that win you trophies and has taken that into account a little bit. Yeah, I'm sure he is a fine details, isn't he? He lives, breathes and sleeps football. But in terms of Guardiola, do you think he'll be looking at this window and looking at the likes of Liverpool, looking at the likes of Arsenal, thinking, hang on a minute, we didn't do enough? Or do you think they'd be happy with what they've done? There has been a few murmurs about that, actually, that maybe the City could have done more. And I must slightly disagree with Jonathan there about the kind of winning now, because it feels like they've signed actually a lot of potential. Right. And they're in an interesting situation, City, and Guardiola as well, because, I mean, he's in the 17th year of his career, and this is basically the first time he's ever to totally rebuild a team. So, obviously, the City team from 2019 is completely different to the one that won the treble in 2023. But that was from, changing 1 or 2 key players every year. Whereas now suddenly he's in this situation where, over the course of 2 windows, they've almost brought in, 2/3 of a first 11. And a lot of these players have to internalise that Guardiola approach, which can take time. And we've obviously seen the kind of how it can take time so far, in that it doesn't feel like this team has yet internalised, say, his off-the-ball approach. They were Brighton just cut through them so easily in a way that was surprising with Rodri back. And it suddenly feels like there's a lot of work to do. And all this, of course, as Jonathan's mentioned there, this is potentially Guardiola's last year. He himself has been openly speaking about what he'll do when he leaves Manchester City, whenever that is. And you do wonder, given what happened last season, is it a bit like kind of, say,
a Ferguson or Wenger situation where they would want to leave on a high, that he didn't want to leave it like last season, and hence they've gone on this spending. But is it spending actually for a kind of a time after Guardiola rather than necessarily a team that he will be able to maximise in one season? Because even in his first season at City in 16-17, it took a little bit of time for that squad to really get honed and drilled in Guardiola's approach.
Do you think that, do you agree with what the guys have been saying? Do you feel that Pep Guardiola needs to win something this season without fail?
I think he does for his own sanity, frankly, because he's so driven as a manager that I think it's more the pressure on himself than the club would put on him, because he's been so incredible for Manchester City, hasn't he? I mean, he's sort of kind of almost redefined football at times, swept the ball with trophies and been an incredibly successful manager. I looked at, the goals that they conceded against Brighton yesterday, and there's a clear issue in sort of the way that they are broken against. It's frightening, really, because, Rodri is still searching for form and fitness. That's obvious, but he's potentially still the best holding midfield player in the world.
Should they have done more business, do you think?
I do think it's strange to me that they haven't done it in specific areas. They've obviously signed out Nori for left back, and that was quite an interesting one. And then he's obviously had a bit of an injury setback. But I do think then that, Diaz and Stones individually are great. But then basically, have they got enough depth to kind of cover those players who are absolute class defenders? Have they, crucially, got enough pace to track back and sort of really counter that? They certainly did in the era of Kyle Walker at his best. Yes. But then obviously that's passed, and now all of a sudden when they are hit on the break, they always seem to be struggling to get players back, and that's the big issue for me. I do think it's such a strange one for me with City and sort of kind of Donnarumma, because they've signed Trafford and it probably looks like it's for the long term. He's not even England's number one at the moment, and he's sort of kind of put in to be number one for kind of one of the main title challengers, and it was a big ask, and I think he makes great saves. He made a brilliant save at Brighton, but then he made a terrible mistake, didn't he, against Tottenham, so he's still finding his way. I think Donnarumma's actually, we've kind of made this mythical figure about Donnarumma. I think he was very, very good in the Champions League run. But I think if I can understand why PSG have changed the goalkeeper, to be honest. I don't think he was. Don't think he is what he was as consistent. He's able to put runs through. So it's an interesting new outlook for City. But I do think you're right, really. I think City need to come back, and listening to the way that Pep talked after the game yesterday, it was almost saying we're not in the mix for the title.
Yeah, felt that very much so.
Wow, what a statement! Because I thought they would be back this season. They may still be, but I thought that was really quite defeatist. It really surprised me.
We are going to talk about the Manchester United goalkeeping situation in just a minute, because it is an 11 p.m. deadline in Scotland, though. Let's head back there now, because Luke Shanley has got some news for us. What can you tell us, Luke?
Well, Vicky, Celtic, we know they've been trying to get players in all day, and they have made a late bid for Sevilla's Kelechi Iheanacho, who played under Brendan Rodgers at Leicester. They did try to get him in the January window, but they were unsuccessful when he decided to join Middlesbrough instead. So that is one that Celtic are working on. They've had a frustrating day. Dahlberg deciding not to go to Celtic and going to Ajax instead. Adamida has left to go to Swansea. They really need to improve in that forward position. So it's Kelechi Iheanacho is who Celtic are targeting late in this Scottish transfer deadline. It's an 11 o'clock deadline, as you said.
All right, brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, Luke. Right, stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to look at more of the stories in the back pages, fresh back pages reaching us all the time, including this in The Sun. As promised, when we return, we're going to look at the new keeper heading to Manchester United, and it's not Emi Martinez. Welcome back. You are watching Back Pages tonight. It's a transfer deadline day special. Still with me, Miguel, Jonathan and John. As promised, we wanted to talk about the situation at Manchester United in terms of the goalkeepers. I mean, all their goalkeepers have come under fire. The Sun have gone with Gloverly business for Manchester rivals. They've got Senna Lammens in. And there was talk of Emi Martinez coming in. Why do you think they've gone for Senna Lammens and not Martinez?
I mean, well, there has been talk all day that Martinez ultimately fell down, possibly because they couldn't get a permanent move for Sancho. I know Sancho's gone to Villa on loan. I'm not sure if that's absolutely true, but it has been the talk all day. And it is a slightly surprising one that maybe it's actually a decision maybe that articulates this kind of delicate point that Manchester United are at, because obviously they've staked a lot on Ruben Amorim, but they also don't want to make the mistake, I suppose, of making every single signing anchored to an individual manager, so that if there is a change, I'm not sure there's going to be, then suddenly they have to change again, because that's been one of the problems at Manchester United. Now, Lammens, he's seen as someone who can be a sensational goalkeeper in the future. And I think from what I was told yesterday, the thinking was that, you know, they could miss out on him and then he could go on and be brilliant elsewhere, and then they'd have felt that they could have done the deal for much cheaper. So that's one of the rationale. But I suppose it's just a strange one because, look, a goalkeeper is already an isolated position. We've talked about it with Trafford and Donnarumma already. At Manchester United, it feels all the more isolated right now, given Manchester United is a punishing environment for a young player without experience at the moment, because the glare is so strong. It's not just the weight of the United shirt, it's the weight of United disarray. So suddenly, if a young player makes one error, and that, especially in goals, I don't want to be talking him down already, it's just more, I suppose, what he's walking into, then that can have an effect. But who knows, we might be talking about a sensation here who immediately can stand up, who has actually that personality. Because I suppose that's maybe where there was some surprise they didn't go for Martinez, because he's got all sorts of personality, and that's what United have needed, really.
Did it surprise you, Jonathan? I mean, Martinez might have seen a very good fit there, somebody that could marshal the back.
Yeah, and obviously he's a personality. I think if you're looking at the modern United and the regime, looking at it in terms of resale value, looking in terms of younger players who essentially you can move on if they don't work out. And you know, the one thing we know about United is that it's probably not going to work out. I'm not going to pretend that I've seen like 90 minutes of every game he's played. But you know, they say he's like decent command of his area. He's good range of passing, and the track record of goalkeepers coming from the Belgian Pro League to the Premier League it's actually not bad. You know, you think of Courtois and Mignolet, but also Matt Sells and Bart Verbruggen at Brighton. So what we don't know, obviously, is, like Miguel says, how he will handle the pressure, the scrutiny. Every single mistake will be scrutinised in minute detail, and also like the chaos of the Premier League penalty area. The goal mouth is refereed much differently in the Premier League to how it is in a lot of other countries, and it's that adaptation which I think is a big tell for how a keeper's going to fare.
Yeah, and is it also a bit of a story, the fact that they potentially, Manchester United, and I don't know for sure, but you'd think that they might have been in for the likes of Donnarumma, and perhaps Manchester United are not the pulling power they perhaps once were?
No, it's been an interesting summer, hasn't it? Because on the one hand, they were still able to attract Šeško ahead of, you know, other big clubs, and Bruno turned down Spurs to go to Old Trafford. You know, and so that those sort of things played into it. Cunha, I'm sure, could have had his pick of other clubs, but indeed, you know, set it out very early on, I want Old Trafford. And so basically, I do still think United have a pulling power. I do think part of the issue there for Donnarumma is I do think he wanted a big payday. I think he's probably got that, you know, a bigger payday at City. And City obviously offer him Champions League football, which he's obviously become very accustomed to and very successful at. Yeah. So, you know, you've got those that I do think that I think opposing teams will now feast upon a young goalkeeping signing and say, OK, let's see what you're about. Because basically it's almost become such a problem position. And this is a massive test for a newcomer. And I do think when you talk about personalities, I think Martinez would have been up for the challenge and would have loved that and would have been good at it. And I think now they are taking a bit of another gamble on a sort of somewhat unproven younger goalkeeper. They've got a few of those on the books already. I mean, Altai's had a couple of really bad games, and they're stacking up these goalkeepers that are not working. And here's another one that's kind of, you know, straight into the line of fire.
It is interesting where they are. So basically, for the two most isolated positions on the pitch, where either you can save your team or potentially make big errors, or offer match winners or miss big chances. They've got two players that have to adapt to the Premier League. One, the new goalkeeper, and Šeško, obviously. And look, I'm not saying that's necessarily going to be bad in the long run, but it's for a team that are where they are, which is where they start to need assurance. There's like an element of uncertainty about both.
It's interesting. I just want to, because I've got all three of you here from the media and myself as well, included in that. But the fact that they say that they do Manchester United come under more scrutiny than any other team. Mboma was talking about it at the weekend. Harry Maguire's spoken about that. Is that something you'd agree with?
Oh, absolutely. And also, I mean, like, this is always the case historically, going back to when Matt Busby made them a great kind of international club. But now, I mean, we're in an era, obviously, where it's gone to a whole other dimension, given, like, we're talking about, 12 super clubs. They're massively popular around the globe, despite the last decade. And like, the whole kind of social media brings a total other element to it. And yeah, that does increase the scrutiny, especially because, I mean, players, before, they could probably shut out this stuff easier, but now, just to go online, they can see all sorts of noise about themselves.
Yeah.
100% it does. I mean, they wouldn't have it any other way, by the way.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they are the self-proclaimed biggest club in the world. I mean, basically, that's how they want to be perceived. The spotlight is on them. I mean, I was fascinated by that game against Burnley on Saturday. What would happen? And basically, you know, we all watched, didn't we, sort of kind of in a ghoulish fashion about what would happen at Grimsby. You're watching that game and thinking, oh, couldn't possibly, could they? And it's just amazing, this kind of Man United soap opera. But make no mistake about it, when they're good, they're absolutely brilliant. I mean, they're dominated for 20 years under Fergie, and we're untouchable. So, you know, that's the standard that they set themselves, and at the moment they're miles off it, and that's the problem that United have. But yeah, they are absolutely under the media spotlight, and they do get more attention, and they kind of, probably crave it, even though they'd never admit it and would sort of kind of deny it.
Because as well as a football club, they are an entertainment brand, they're an advertising space, and you know, they pride themselves on their social media numbers and their reach and their clout. And what the football team needs is a little bit of time away from the spotlight to reflect and just get their heads down, and Manchester United PLC cannot allow that, because their brand is essentially what sustains them.
Yeah, I would love to get into the Amarin debate, but we haven't got time for that. Let's move our way along to Chelsea, because obviously there was a bit of a situation. We spoke a little bit about it. Nicolas Jackson, you know, being pulled each which way. He has got his move now to Bayern, a £70 million deal. What did you make of the situation of this? You know, it wasn't a little bit unseemly.
It was pretty undignified.
Yeah.
You know, it had Odin Wingy vibes. You know, for the transfer deadline day hardcore. You know, the old schoolers.
I hear you.
You know, he gets on a plane to Munich, and then obviously Delap gets injured. He gets recalled, and there is this very unseemly, I guess you'd call it like a public, you know, standoff between, you know, Jackson's team and Chelsea. Where you know, we don't know whether, you know, and he basically tries to force the move through anyway, but he basically says, well, I'm staying in Munich. And so it appears that he's got his move. I think it's a good move for the player. It's a good move for Bayern, who have been looking for a player, you know, looking for reinforcements in that position. I think there's an obligation to buy as well. So, you know, one of the themes of this window has been Chelsea doing not just incredible incoming business, but being incredibly efficient at selling and getting good fees for their talent.
Have Chelsea got that?
I was just laughing, sorry, and I know I put Jonathan off there, because the headline there, it's a £70 million deal for Jackson. It's 2 years after they signed him for £30 million.
That's great business.
I think most people would say he's been a bit hit and miss, and that would be kind of generous. I've seen a player in Jackson. I think there is a player in Jackson. He's got so much potential. He has got goals in him, and he has got strength, and he's got kind of, you know, the qualities I think you need for the Premier League. But it's just mind-blowing. I mean, the way that Chelsea, you know, we sort of put the microscope on them, don't we, for the business ins and outs. But the way they turn over players is incredible, and basically is astonishing. They put so much store in signing forwards because they know that they can move the forwards on for a profit, and they can do this business. And it's, but that is super shrewd. It's incredible. No wonder they resurrected it.
I think there's been actually three themes to this window that Chelsea actually sum up. One is the old Big Six, and I know people get very annoyed about that phrase, but I say the wealthiest clubs have been buying stars from last season's middle class. It's culminated with Isak, but obviously Chelsea have actually done a great piece of business with João Pedro, who's been one of the revelations of the season so far. Another has been this issue of unwanted players, and how it feels like such an obvious thing to say, but obviously some clubs haven't thought about it to that extent, where selling is now as important as buying, especially in a PSR-influenced world. Chelsea have obviously become extremely good at it. They've kind of kept this kind of constant movement in their squad and gradually increased the level of their squad. And the third theme is how chaotic it's been in the last 2 days. And that's almost a strange thing with Chelsea's built, because I think they've generally had a good summer. They've been efficient. And then suddenly in the last 2 days, there's a lot of kind of deals you're looking at. Well, that's a strange happening there. Like even the deal with Brighton today.
What a naughty.
And of course, like the whole Jackson episode. And it's suddenly, not that it's taken the gloss off, I think what has been good business, but suddenly there's a few more questions, I'd say, over generally a really efficient window.
It's interesting how they've dealt with that, because I think actually if they'd had to integrate him, that might have been a problem for Maresca as well, because we were talking about that, weren't we, John, before, about the fact that some players have had their heads turned to go one way and then they're still staying. Like Richarlison, quite a good example of somebody that had lit it up for the first couple of weeks, had a very quiet game at the weekend, but also his name had been involved in the Eze swap deal. So it's like, what does that do to a player? You know, that's a lot of that's gone on this window, it feels.
Absolutely. I do think that kind of managing that dressing room must be such a challenge for a player, especially when you kind of think about, I mean, the Newcastle one with Asula fascinated me. You know, he's obviously kind of part of the merry-go-round today, but, you know, you had a week or so ago, Eddie Howe saying, well, we haven't got a natural forward at the club. What about the guy, you know, the guy that scored against Liverpool? But it's amazing. And then how do you deal with that? I mean, imagine if Jackson had ended up staying, because he's a big personality, Jackson, and I do think it's probably best for all parties, because I actually think he's got the personality to go somewhere and succeed. I quite like him. He's, you know, and I actually sort of kind of think he'll go on and be a big star somewhere.
Okay. Right, stay with us. We're going to take another quick little break on our Deadline Day special. We'll be back with more of the headlines in the morning papers. The Star, we can look at that, reflecting on the mega money that's been spent on Alexander Isak. And it's been a huge spend, actually, across the whole league, across the summer. I think we're into £3 billion. We'll cover that for you next. Welcome back to this special Back Pages tonight, the last 5 minutes or so with us on this transfer deadline day. Quite a lot of money was spent, John. We think we're up to £3 billion. Did that surprise you?
It has surprised me. And I do, listen, we love it, don't we? It's showbiz, it's a circus. Well, exactly. Look, you know, we're in the business of kind of, you know, the back pages are lit up by it. Sky Sports News, you know, feeds off it for months, you know, and it's brilliant entertainment. It's now part of football culture, isn't it? The transfer window. But the other thing that it does say to me loud and clear is that £3 billion, and a lot of these deals are done between Premier League clubs, so let's not lose sight of that. Yeah. But I think over the next couple of days, a lot of people within football will be saying, how about that deal? You know, how about kind of feeding some money down the football pyramid and basically kind of working things out for the EFL clubs and the football pyramid? And I wouldn't mind betting that the EFL will be going, £3 billion and we still can't do a deal. And basically, you know, so I think there's so much money in football, and I do feel as if surely there's got to be a little bit of a fairer share, isn't there? And kind of, you know, knock-on effect. We all love it, and we all love these kind of fantastic signings, and I'm not knocking that, but come on, you know, sure, spend it and spread it out a bit as well.
The thing about all that, and the one thing I don't like about where the game is going in that sense, in that it feels like the top end is just narrowing, and we're just losing that variety and vitality, both in England and in Europe. I mean, look at Isak, say, in a previous era, like even 15, 20 years ago, there would have been a series of clubs he could have gone to that could have offered him like competitive football at Champions League level, say Valencia or someone like that. And that's just like, now we're in a summer where Barcelona, kind of previously the great white shark of the kind of transfer food chain along with Real Madrid, they would have wanted Isak, but they couldn't even have a look in. So they had to go for a kind of a knockdown deal with Rashford. And it's that kind of concentration of wealth, I feel, is an issue. And John's right. I think it's going to provoke a lot of debate this week. The EFL will be looking at it. And that's not the only thing I think that's caused irritation in the EFL. I mean, I've had a few people on to me today about, say, like some clubs are looking at, well, in the EFL, say, a deal sheet is actually legally binding. In the Premier League, it's basically just an extension of the window, or extension of the deadline. And as we've seen tonight, it's two deals now that haven't been, they've had deal sheets go through and haven't actually...
Is that because of this, it's an early closure and it's like the 7 p.m. window as opposed to the midnight? Do you think... because we've had more, I think.
The Premier, so with the EFL, they enforce the deal sheet. Basically, it's legally binding, so the deal has to go through. With the Premier League, it just seems an extension. I suppose that goes hand in hand with a bit of a debate about financial regulations in the Premier League. There's also been a lot of criticism, separate to the concept of PSO, but actually the drafting of the rules, also, I suppose, what PSR has done. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing in the last few days, and especially today, is a direct consequence of PSR, and especially the kind of chaos that comes from this property market element that's created where there's a chain and like teams don't, like we saw today with Palace really, they don't want to sell until they have a player in.
It's a domino effect,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
it? And then the gazumping goes on as well. I mean, where do you stand?
Yeah, I mean, like John talked about the theatre of the transfer window, and you know, like I say, there is an incredible drama to it. You know, like the Sky Sports News, the deadline day, the countdown clock, the totaliser, the here we go, man. You know, people like fans tracking planes over the North Sea, like.
Yeah.
But and these fantastical figures end up getting thrown around. Where does this money come from? It comes from you. It comes from the fans. It comes from the people who pay their money to watch the game. And I'll just remember this kind of fever when I guess it gets to February, March, April, and the season ticket renewals come in, because this spend is going to have to be paid for ultimately, and it's going to be the ordinary match-going fan who ends up paying for it.
OK, we've got about a minute, so I'm going to give you 20 seconds each, pretty much. Who's had the best window and why? Got 20 seconds to go down the line.
Liverpool, without a shadow of a doubt. Isak, Wirtz, strengthened all over the pitch, new fullbacks. I just think, they're already the team to beat. Now they've gone to a whole new level. I just think what a fantastic window. You know, we can talk all day about the politics of it, but if you're judging it purely on acquisitions, by far and away the best window.
Jonathan?
Luke Edwards.
Luke Edwards.
Yeah, or Indy Kyler, one of them. It's been
That's what you want to say.
Fantastic window for both.
Right, OK, all right. Your window.
I'm going to say Sunderland, who
Really?
have done, they've got, I think, they've, for a team that's come up, they've done very clever business. I think signed very astutely, and like if you speaking to industry figures, they say actually pound for pound, Sunderland have had an excellent window.
All right, OK, thank you so much for joining me, Miguel Delaney, Jonathan Liu and John Cross as well. Thank you so much. It has been a very interesting deadline day. We'll have plenty more coming your way, of course. Back pages tonight, returns tomorrow. It's a normal one. Guests will be Jack Rossett from The Sun and Raith Al-Samarite from the Daily Mail as well. And, of course, the podcast is available as well.